So in your documentation, in Android documentation, we have our camera API, which is a framework that supports camera and camera features. But if you kept reading, you will find out that it's depreciated and it is recommended to use CameraX or Camera 2 Plus. So this camera API is important, so you probably need to read this documentation in order to have a better understanding for how camera works. Anyway, we just ignore the depreciated warning right now and we go down. For the consideration when you're trying to build an app that requires a hardware feature of camera, then some consideration you need to, is the camera a mandatory requirement or not? So that means, does your app need the camera? Like if the app is just a single camera, then it's mandatory. But if, for example, in our app we have a text field which we can use, we can allow the user to use for it to deserialize. So the user just insert his serial number in our text field and the app decode it by its own. So our camera is an optional feature. It's not mandatory. So for camera requirement, we don't really need mandatory requirements. And if we need to declare it as a requirement, we should add the camera requirement in manifest. We also need to make decision. Are we gonna make a quick picture or customized camera? A quick picture means here that we're gonna take a snippets of images, like capture images, maybe capture videos, and this kind of stuff, which is this one. And if you're trying to customize camera, that's just using camera and analyzing what's visible on the preview right now. And just another tip, camera doesn't work on the background thread. They don't work background, they work only in the foreground and also in the UI thread. The foreground, I think, can work on the background thread, but in order to show a change, it needs to be working on the UI thread. I'm not 100% sure, but it's probably this way. So for the storage, if we're gonna use a storage like it's a quick picture above, so we have some kind of combination with quick pictures. But for our app, we're not gonna use any kind of storage because we're analyzing the preview. So what are the basics of capturing camera or videos and so on? So you can work with intent, like you just send an intent to another apps who can handle capturing images and saving it, and you just return the result. And this is an approach you can make, or you can use Camera 2X, which is a newer version of the camera. And here is just telling you some information about how can, or not how, just simple details about the components you're gonna use if you're gonna use the camera. And if you want to add the camera permission in the manifest, in order to use the camera, you need to add the permission of the camera. And you also should choose use feature of the camera if it's mandatory, I think, because it has like some option here. Yes, to this option, if Android required, false or true. The default value is true, I think. So if you want to add it as a mandatory, just make required as true. If you don't, make required as false. And there are other permissions which you might have need to handle, like storage, audio if you're recording video, for example, and storage for images and so on. That location permission is just for GPS. I don't even know why it's being easier. So moving on, you can use existing camera using intent. And in order to build a camera app, like the one we're going to try to build, we need to have some couple of steps. We need first to detect and access camera. We need to create a preview. We need to build a preview layout that's for XML. So unfortunately, right now Jetpack Compose doesn't support preview layout, so we need to use Android view systems to work around this solution. And if you want to have like an action, like start recording or any action you want on the camera, you want to have listener, that's required using pressing a button, for example. And if you want to capture and save files, but we wouldn't really capture and save files. And importantly, you need to release the camera after using the app, after finishing using the camera device. So you will, if you forgot this step, that means you're draining the resources of your device by maintaining the camera, because the camera is a highly intensive application which require a lot of resources. Every bit on this camera is being rendered, so you need really to be aware of that. Alright, so now that's the most important topic I want to give like an introduction about how camera work and how camera do. And in order to release camera in the old depreciated way, it was camera.release, but later on we will choose another approach. And this is just some implementation about how can you detect as these 6 steps which you have in it covered. You just cover them in code, but that's an old depreciated way.